This year's Joburg Pride March is dedicated to those who can't march for themselves, particularly in Uganda. Now, earlier this year, that government criminalised same-sex relationships, which was met with a backlash globally. Now, LGBTQ plus activist and Access Chapter 2 Director Steve Letsike joins us to talk more about this. Now, Steve, we're talking to you just after speaking to my colleague at the funeral of 12-year-old Sibusiso Mbata, who allegedly was the victim of bullying, of homophobic comments, allegedly made by an educator repeatedly, and he then decided to take his young life. It puts a really sobering cloud over an event like Joburg Pride, doesn't it?
Indeed, of course, we've been seeing, not only just the recent Busiso's, incident of this nature. We've seen what has happened in Western last year. We've seen also what has happened in Free State, and this is a serious concern where young lives, young queer people, continue to commit suicide because of the level of discrimination, in school, in society. These are preventable. One more death is enough. We cannot afford to lose children because of the high level of intolerance and discrimination in the school system. That's unacceptable.
Yeah. And it brings to mind an ongoing discussion about safe spaces, in South Africa. Of course, we have very few safe spaces to begin with generally. But for those who identify with the community, even more so, on all accounts, 12-year-old Sibusiso Mbata had a good relationship with his family. He apparently had been talking to his mother about the bullying he was facing. And yet still, in as much as it sounds like he had a safe space at home, his school space was not safe.
No, indeed. I mean, this is the concerns that we have raised with the Department of Basic Education around safety net, around bullying. In fact, the department itself had developed, the anti-bullying campaign that addresses challenges, with teachers, with learners, their peers for that nature. To an extent that there was an introduction of the SOGIAS policy in schools so that it helps teachers, it helps learners, it also helps the system itself to respond adequately to the challenges affecting LGBTI people. We are seeing an emerging support and really safe space in homes, but society has to transform to really deal with some of the challenges. I think it's a big problem if at all we are not going to build extreme social cohesion and also build a zero tolerance approach to addressing this. Our government has put systems in place, but we need these systems to be implementable, and those accountable must be held accountable. We can't afford any child anywhere to be discriminated in any way.
And having one of the most progressive constitutions in the world is one thing. It's all there in black and white. But too many of our young people are still dealing with stigma at community level. And do you believe that there is a perception that while progress might be made in our metros, it's in the forgotten communities on the peripheries or in the rural areas where stigma is such an issue? You'd think that is the perception, but then we're still hearing stories like just a couple of months ago or a few weeks ago, the student, a Johannesburg student who, because he was afraid of stigma or whatever you want to call it, found himself in a very dangerous position because he was catfished. Why are we still having an issue with stigma in communities across the board?
Look, I think we must not shy away to really name the nature or characterize the nature of homophobia, transphobia that still exists in society. We have to face this. I think there's a kind of lack of rule of law, and respect for humanity and dignity and freedoms of people, by members of society and societal institutions, that still continues to really practice conversion therapy and to run heteronormativity and even patriarchy in society. This is fueled We must never deny that. And we're finding it that the violence, the extreme targeting of LGBTI persons, it's something that is not dealt with in effective manner. I mean, just about 2 months ago, the National Department of Justice and Constitutional Development launched the National Strategic Plan to really deal with this level of human rights violation beyond just the exact crime itself. We have a best constitution, but this constitution must become a lived reality for all. And I think our own system have made it clear that we have a constitution that must be really protected, promoted, and the lives of LGBTI people must really be protected. I think President Ramaphosa was very clear on that. But now, the problem is not the law. The problem is society and how we must deal with stigma. There's been an extent of sensitization awareness. No person in this country can say they don't know LGBTI person, or they cannot necessarily, or they don't understand the law. There's a total disrespect. And that is where we need to enforce our laws, ensure that people's lives are not at stake and that we don't cost anyone's life in any way. Safe space must be created and must be created intentionally to deal with prejudice in society.
And that is why an event like Joburg Pride is still important. Yes, it's seen as a big old party, or patsy, as they call it in Cape Town for many. It is important for that space, for the LGBTQ plus community and their allies to be given a space like a Pride celebration to make their presence felt, especially for those who don't feel confident enough or don't feel safe enough to take up that space.
No doubt, Johannesburg Pride and prides everywhere are the most significant, important safe space where LGBTI persons, can really be themselves and can also come together to build allyship, support, and solidarity. It's quite important to realize that, the first Pride in South Africa took place in 1990. You've got people like Simon Colley, Beverly Beatty, and many human rights defenders who stood up and protected and fought actually for the rights of LGBTI persons. You've got even the ANC government that has been building solidarity with the LGBTI community for the longest time. And I think it's quite important to realize why we should be intentional in our effort. So being out there, it's a sign of protest, but it's also a sign of expressing love, expressing resilience, and expressing visibility for LGBTI community. And I think we stand up as queer community, we stand up with those who rise with us to understand the intersectional issues. And we must make sure that it's not only in the urban areas, it's in the rural areas, township, where visibility matters, but also where human rights and the right of persons matters the most.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that. Some great insight there from Steve Letsike, LGBTQ plus activist and Access Chapter 2 Director. Some sobering points being made there as Joburg Pride takes place at the Wanderers.